Sophie's fingers, curled around her coffee mug, froze for an instant, and a ripple raced around the porcelain wall as the scalding liquid shivered. Across from her sat the man, Derek, reigning chairman of Sterling Global, the legend rumored to be as cold and celibate as marble, watching her with the ink-dark eyes finance magazines called Tempered in Ice. His expression was as detached as if he were negotiating a takeover deal. "Tomorrow we get the license." Not a question, a notice. Sophie set the cup down, her voice soft, threaded with just the right tremor. "Sam, are you joking?" Today she wore an off-white sundress that made her look harmless and pitiable, a stray bunny wandering into a wolf pack. It was the cover identity she had rehearsed for 3 months. Derek's brows drew together, his gaze lingered for a second on her whitening knuckles, then flicked away. "Your family needs an equity infusion from Sterling. I need a nominal wife. A contract marriage, each takes what they need, an amicable divorce in 1 year." Sophie lowered her lashes. She waited 5 beats before answering in a voice that sounded ready to crack. I need time to think." "Fine." Derek rose. "But only tonight." He turned and left, back straight as a pine, stride steady, no trace of reluctance. Only after his silhouette vanished beyond the revolving door did Sophie lift her head slowly. She brushed away the single, perfectly timed tear, and smiled. The smile bore no resemblance to the fragile act of a moment earlier. The outer corners of her eyes lifted, cunning and victorious, Plan A achieved. 3 hours earlier, Sterling Global's top-floor office. Derek stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, a snapshot between his fingers. In it a girl in a plain white tee and jeans grinned on the library steps. "Sophie, 3 years ago." "Sir." Liam knocked and entered, "his file is complete." Regular background, divorced parents, lives with her mother. Majored in finance at Riverdale U, now a clerical worker at a back-office brokerage. Seems unremarkable. Unremarkable? Derek pivoted, the corner of his mouth lifting in a curve Liam had never seen. She won the National College Financial Modeling Cup 3 years ago, her thesis was published in Journal, yet she's content with a $5,000 monthly paycheck at a no-name shop. You call that unremarkable? Jordan, then why did you accept this arranged introduction? Derek slid the photo gently into a drawer. Because I've waited 3 years for her. That rainy afternoon 3 years earlier, he'd first seen her at a campus lecture. She sat in the last row, taking notes, occasionally lifting her head to the podium, gaze clear as a mountain spring. He'd spoken the entire session and remembered none of it, only the small pale patch of skin at the nape of her neck when she bent to write, and the faint scent of jasmine in her hair. Afterward he'd had someone find her. Sophie, top of the finance program, gentle temperament, plenty of suitors, none accepted. He'd meant to approach her when the talk ended, but an emergency board call had dragged him back to Midtown. By the time he returned, she was gone. He had searched for her ever since, until last week, when the Hawthorne family unexpectedly proposed a strategic marriage. He normally spat on such alliances, yet the instant he saw the daughter's name, Sophie, he agreed. Liam, Derek's expression chilled back to boardroom steel, make tomorrow's introduction formal. Yes, sir. Also, Derek paused, the tip of his ear flushing, find out, what kind of proposal women like. Liam, huh? Derek shot him a glacial glare. Not a real proposal, just, even a contract marriage needs ceremony. After Liam retreated, Derek sat alone in his leather chair, staring at the ceiling. He pulled out his phone, opened an encrypted folder titled How to Be a Good Husband, containing hundreds of saved articles. He studied until 3 a.m., finally concluding, stay aloof but not too aloof, take initiative but not too much, show concern but keep it subtle. Play hard to get, he murmured, nodding at the screen. Act indifferent first, let her drop her guard, then infiltrate her life step by step. He thought the scheme flawless, utterly unaware that his future wife, on the other side of the city, was smiling the exact same plan-achieved smile at his photograph. Sophie exited the cafe, night had draped itself over Riverdale. She didn't flag a cab but walked slowly along the sidewalk. Passing a convenience store, she paused to buy a chilled can of coffee, leaning against the plate glass to sort her thoughts. Family crisis, Hawthorns glittered on the surface, yet liabilities dwarfed assets. Her so-called father had vanished with the cash when her mother fell ill, leaving a mountain of debt. Hawthorne needed a $50 million lifeline, only Sterling was willing, and the price was marriage. Her strategy: 3 years ago she first saw Derek at that lecture, white shirt, composed authority. For the first time she understood the word presence. She had remembered him for 3 years, so when the family named him as the match, she agreed instantly. Yet she knew ordinary pursuit would never pierce his armor. He'd seen every predatory trick and grown immune. Hence her reverse hunt: act weak and pitiful, let him believe she accepted the engagement under duress, then gradually show her real self after the wedding and watch him fall. She finished the coffee, tossed the can, and tilted her face to the night sky, that sly arc reappearing on her lips. "Derek, you think you're hunting me? In truth, I'm the hunter." Meanwhile, atop Sterling Global, Derek stood at the window, phone in hand. On the screen, a photo just relayed: Sophie leaving the cafe, buying coffee, throat bared as she drank. His ear tips reddened again. "She's adorable," he whispered to the picture, voice soft enough to melt. "Even the way she drinks is cute." He had completely forgotten the cold stranger he'd played that afternoon. Now he was a smitten boy mooning over his crush. "Tomorrow we get the license." He pressed the photo to his chest and closed his eyes. "Sophie, I'll treat you well. Even if all you want is a contract, I'll spoil you like a real wife." Beyond the glass the city glittered like spilled starlight. Two schemers, at opposite ends of the skyline, wore identical plan-achieved smiles. Each believed themselves predator and the other prey, neither realizing this contract marriage had, from its very first breath, been a conspiracy of hearts rushing toward the same target. Early the next morning, frantic knocking jerked Sophie awake. She opened the door to her mother's swollen eyes. "Sophie," Eleanor clutched her hand, voice shaking, "your father, he's back. He says if you refuse the marriage, he'll sell my house to cover the debt." Sophie's gaze turned arctic. "Mom," she squeezed Eleanor's fingers, tone gentle but steely, "don't worry. I've already agreed. We're getting the license today." Eleanor stared. You agreed? But that Sam, the rumors say he's fine." Sophie smiled. "Much better than the rumors." She didn't mention the all-nighter she'd spent pulling every public appearance, interview transcript, even the posts he liked on social media. She'd discovered that behind the ruthless facade lay hidden facets: the anonymous endowment that funded scholarships at his alma mater, the dozen strays housed in a rooftop cattery, the rare interview where he confessed he envied the ordinary scent of life. The deeper she dug, the more interesting he became. An iceberg on the surface, a volcano underneath. That adorable contrast felt like prey tailor-made for her. "Sophie," Eleanor still couldn't rest easy, "are you absolutely sure? Marriage isn't a game." "He won't back out," Sophie answered, voice steady as steel. "I guarantee it." Because she had already seen through the man's mask. During yesterday's arranged introduction she had deliberately dropped her napkin under the table. When she bent to retrieve it she caught sight of his hands, those hands rumored never to touch a woman, clenched around the tablecloth, knuckles bleached white. He was nervous. He was restraining himself. He was terrified she might reject him. The discovery had nearly made her laugh out loud on the spot. But she swallowed it and kept playing the pitiful little white rabbit. Too cute. She had never met a man this cute. 10 o'clock sharp, outside City Hall Marriage Bureau. Sophie wore a simple white shirt and an A-line skirt, face bare of makeup, looking every inch a fresh college grad. Standing at the foot of the steps, she tilted her head back at the stately building and felt her pulse race, rare for her. Not nerves. Excitement. She had waited 3 years for this day. "Quinn." The low, cool voice came from behind. She turned to see Derek step out of a black Mercedes Maybach, impeccably suited, expression glacial. But Sophie noticed, the instant his gaze landed on her his pupils flared, his Adam's apple slid, and only then did he wrench his eyes away. He was looking. He was anxious. He was fighting to keep his frosty cover. "Sam," Sophie murmured, eyes downcast. I'm here." Derek gave a frosty grunt. "Let's go in." He pivoted toward the doors, stride steady, back ramrod straight. No sign that his palms were already slick or that his heart was trying to punch through his ribs. She looked so beautiful today. That white shirt made her skin seem milkier, made him want to sweep her into his arms and protect her. No, stay cool. Play hard to get, play hard to get. He repeated the mantra, yet climbing the steps he almost marched left right out of rhythm. Sophie followed, watching the tall, slightly rigid back, a tiny smile on her lips. Of course she'd felt his nerves. She'd even registered his cologne, no longer the usual crisp woody note but a faintly sweet citrus. Too cute. How could a man be this cute? Side by side they entered the bureau, filling forms, signing, posing for the snapshot. The whole process was eerily silent. The clerk kept sneaking glances at the couple, the man an iceberg, the woman a timid bunny, looking anything but bride and groom material. Congratulations, and happy wedding, the clerk said, handing over the 2 red booklets. Derek took them, fingers trembling faintly. He wanted to say something, maybe, please take care of me, maybe, I'll treat you well, maybe, actually, I fell for you 3 years, but nothing came. He only gave a curt thrust 1 booklet at Sophie, and spun to leave. Sam, she called. He stopped, didn't turn. What? Where are we going now? Her voice quavered, hurt. Derek shut his eyes. He meant to say separate homes, call if you need me, the original plan. Yet right now all he heard was that tiny wounded tone, like a kitten left in the rain. To my place, he heard himself answer. Pick up your things, then move in. The moment the words left his mouth he regretted them. Too fast, he'd scare her. But Sophie lifted her face, eyes shimmering with stars. Oh okay, Riley. Her joy was so bright, so genuine, that every strategy evaporated. Come on, he said, voice unconsciously softer. Let's go home. In the Mercedes Maybach's back seat they sat at opposite ends, a gap wide enough for another person between them. Derek stared out the window, face stern. In truth he was wondering, what shampoo does she use? It smells incredible. Sophie kept her head down, fingertip drawing circles on her knee, seeming nervous. Inside she was thinking, his profile is perfect, and those lashes, so long. At a red light Derek finally risked a sidelong glance. Sunlight streamed through the glass, gilding her gentle outline. Her lashes cast feathery shadows that fluttered each time she blinked, like butterfly wings. He was still entranced when the light changed and the driver pulled away. Snapping back, he jerked his gaze to the street. Sophie had sensed every second. She counted, 3. He'd stared 3 seconds, 1 more than yesterday. Tangible progress. The car stopped outside a luxury high-rise. Derek climbed out first, hesitated a full 2 seconds, then extended his hand toward her. Out, he said coolly. Mind the step. Sophie stared at those long fingers. The aloof, woman-repelling CEO of Sterling Global was offering to help her? She laid her hand in his. Warm, dry, faintly damp. The instant they touched he stiffened. Yet he didn't let go, only held tighter. Let's go, he said, voice husky. Home. The penthouse was open plan, panoramic windows, decor an austere black-white-gray that felt like a showroom. Your room's on the 2nd floor, Derek announced from the foyer, shoes still on, deliberately distant. I'm on 3. If you need anything, call. He turned to leave. Sophie stopped him. Sam, he paused. Her voice was a breath. We're married now, right? Derek's back was to her. She couldn't see his face, but his ear tips reddened again. A contract marriage, he said flatly. Divorce in 1 year. No interference. I know, Sophie whispered. But, could we at least share dinner tonight? I can cook. I don't want to be alone. He closed his eyes. He meant to refuse, to keep the distance. Yet when he faced her she was gazing down, fingers twisting the hem of her shirt, small and drenched looking like a soaked kitten. Fine. The word slipped out. Sophie's eyes lit like galaxies. Really? Riley. Her radiant smile made every rule feel like garbage. He only knew he wanted her to keep smiling. I'll check what's in the kitchen, she said, heading that way. Passing him she accidentally tripped. Watch out. On instinct Derek caught her waist. Time froze. He held her, palm against the slender curve, feeling her warmth, her softness. Her hair brushed his jaw, jasmine drifting up, stealing his senses. Sophie leaned in his arms. Casey, eyes dewy, startled doe-wide. Sorry, she stammered. I didn't mean to. She stayed there a heartbeat longer, savoring the thunder of his heart against her. Derek finally jolted back as if burned, releasing her and stepping away, ears crimson. It's nothing, he said, voice so hoarse it was almost unrecognizable. You, go ahead and cook. I've got some work upstairs. The moment the words left his mouth he fled, taking the stairs two at a time as though ghosts were snapping at his heels. Sophie stayed where she was, watching that frantic retreat, and finally burst out laughing. Derek, she whispered to the empty foyer, you're even more adorable than I imagined. Up on the third-floor study, Derek locked the door behind him and slid down until he was sitting on the carpet, back pressed to the panels. I'm finished, he muttered. Totally finished. All that hard-won push and pull, the careful distance, the Ice King persona, around her it never survived past the 3-second mark. When he'd held her moments ago he'd almost blurted, I've loved you for 3 years. Thank God he'd stopped himself in time. He yanked out his phone, opened the folder titled, How to Be a Good Husband, and started scrolling like a man possessed. What should a husband do while his wife cooks? How to praise your wife's cooking naturally. First dinner together, details you can't overlook? He studied each bullet, nodding gravely, exactly the way he dissected a billion-dollar takeover deck, utterly oblivious that the prey he was tracking was downstairs right now, dicing vegetables and humming, her mood sky-high. Step 1, Sophie said, tossing diced carrot into the wok, lips curved in triumph, get him to hug me on his own, achieved. Step 2, she continued, pulling the ingredients Derek had prepped from the fridge, every one of them her favorites, make him get used to me being around. Step 3. She paused, glanced toward the staircase, eyes tender and cunning, make him fall for the real me. Outside the windows the sun was setting, washing the city in liquid gold. Dinner turned out to be far more excruciating than Derek had budgeted for. He sat at the table, gaze locked on Sophie's back as she moved between stove and counter, fighting to keep the impassive tycoon mask glued in place. In reality his peripheral vision hadn't left her for more than 3 heartbeats. The way she knotted the apron, sleeves rolled to the elbow, slim forearms flashing, the tiny frown while she tasted a sauce, the tip of her tongue sweeping her lower lip, the tilt of her head when she set a plate in front of him and smiled, each micro-movement carved another sliver off his self-control. Sam, she said, positioning the final dish, voice feather soft, I wasn't sure about your preferences, so I just made a few homestyle dishes. I hope that's all right. 4 courses plus soup, sautéed shrimp, garlicky broccoli, scrambled eggs with tomato, sweet and sour ribs, and a bowl of nori egg drop broth. Derek stared at the scrambled eggs with tomato, Adam's apple jerking. It was the dish his mother used to make him when he was small. How could she possibly know, Cameron? He fought to keep his tone glacial. Sit. Eat. They faced each other in silence. Derek chewed deliberately, every gesture the picture of boardroom poise, even though what he really wanted was to wolf the food down, because it tasted better than anything any Michelin chef had ever plated for him. Sam, Sophie ventured, timid, does it taste okay? He lifted his eyes. She was staring at her rice, prodding a single grain with her chopsticks, braced for rejection. It's acceptable, he said, then added, the scrambled eggs with tomato, good. Her gaze ignited instantly. Really? It's my signature dish. I was afraid you wouldn't like it. 2 shallow dimples appeared, her smile equal parts innocence and triumph. Derek's heart lurched, skipped a beat. He lowered his head, resumed eating, and felt the tips of his ears burn. You eat too, he muttered, voice softer than he intended. Stop watching me. Why yes. She bent over her bowl, scooping rice with comic seriousness. At an angle he couldn't see, the corner of her mouth ticked upward by a single pixel. Afterward Sophie cleared the table. Derek almost said, leave it, housekeeper will handle it, but the sight of her looping the apron strings and rolling up her sleeves with practiced ease stopped the words in his throat. He settled on the living room sofa, documents balanced on one knee, and covertly watched her wash up. She worked briskly, clearly used to the chore, yet now and then she paused to press the small of her back or knead a shoulder, fatigue flashing across her face. Derek's brows drew together. He remembered the dossier, how she'd lived alone with her mother after her father vanished with the creditor's cash, the mountain of debt, the $5,000 monthly paycheck that barely covered Eleanor's meds. She had to be exhausted. The realization pinched something in his chest. He almost strode over, took the sponge, and said, "Go rest, I'll finish," but the strategy manual shouted, "Too eager, back off." Still, he rose, poured a glass of water, and casually set it beside her elbow. "Riley." Sophie's head snapped up, eyes sparkling. You're so kind." Derek answered with a curt then retreated at record speed. Sophie watched him flee, smile widening. 10 p.m. Sophie, freshly showered and swaddled in sensible cotton pajamas, hovered outside her second-floor bedroom. She glanced up the staircase, hesitated, then padded softly toward the third floor. The study door stood ajar, a sliver of light slicing across the landing. She tapped. "Sam, are you still awake?" A flurry of thuds came from inside, followed by Derek's forcibly calm baritone, "Come in." She slipped through. He sat at the desk, a file spread before him, pen in hand, ear tips crimson, the document upside down. Pretending not to notice, Sophie stared at her slippers. "Sam, I wanted to ask, is there anything I need to do tomorrow?" "Not for now," he said. "But next week, there's a charity gala. You'll come with me, really?" She lifted her face, eyes star-bright. "And may I?" "No," Derek blurted, realized the brusque timing, and amended, You look good in white." "Wear a white gown that night." Instant regret scalded him. Since when did he issue wardrobe directives? But Sophie only beamed, crescent-eyed. "All right. I'll listen to Sam." She turned to leave, then tripped over the carpet's edge and pitched forward, careful. Derek lunged again, catching her mid-fall. This time she landed flush against him, forehead to his sternum, her ear over the jackhammer of his heart. The collar of her pajamas had slipped, revealing a delicate triangle of collarbone. The air solidified. Blood roared in Derek's ears. He meant to step back, yet his hand stayed welded to her shoulders. I am sorry." Sophie murmured into his shirt, voice muffled and trembling. I am always so clumsy." "You're not," he heard himself answer, hoarse. "You just need time to adjust." As though controlled by some outside force, his palm slid down and gave her back the lightest, most reassuring pat. She stiffened for a heartbeat, then slowly tilted her face up. Eyes glistening, cheeks flushed, lips parted, Derek's gaze dropped to her mouth, his Adam's apple bobbed hard once. He wanted to kiss her. The urge tore through him like wildfire, singeing the edges of every vow he'd made about keeping this marriage strictly contractual. He couldn't. "Not yet. Go to bed," he rasped, releasing her and retreating 2 steps, shoulders rigid as poured concrete. "We'll talk tomorrow." He pivoted, presenting her with a ramrod straight back. Sophie studied that stiff silhouette, the smile on her lips barely suppressed. She dropped her gaze and whispered, then, "Good night, Sam." "Good night." She slipped away, footsteps featherlight, a cat who'd just licked the cream. Inside her own room she shut the door, buried her face in the pillow, and laughed herself weak, silently, jubilantly, until her shoulders shook. "Derek," she said to the empty air, "you're finished." The next evening, Derek didn't come home for dinner. Sophie knew he was hiding from her. Last night had rattled him. He needed time to sort out his thoughts, but she wasn't in a hurry. She had all the patience in the world. At 10 p.m. she heard the front door open downstairs. She jumped off the couch, ran to the top of the stairs, and saw Derek standing in the foyer, exhaustion in every line of him, his tie hanging loose at his throat. "Sam," she called softly. "You're back." Derek looked up. She stood in her pajamas, hair cascading, eyes bright, as if she'd waited up just for him. His heart missed a beat. He answered, glancing away. "Why aren't you asleep?" "Waiting for you." Sophie came down the steps. "I saved dinner. I can reheat it." "No need," Derek said. "I ate at the office." "Then, some soup?" Sophie stepped in front of him and tipped her head back. "I simmered pork rib broth. It's gentle on the stomach. You drank so much last night, your stomach must." She reached to loosen his tie, but the moment her fingers brushed his collar he caught her wrist. They froze together. His hand was warm and dry, clamped tight around her wrist. His gaze drilled into her, so deep she felt herself falling. "Sophie," he rasped, "don't be this nice to me." "Why not?" "Because," he hesitated, his Adam's apple jerking, "because I'll misunderstand." "Misunderstand what?" Derek stared, restraint and hunger twisting in his eyes. He opened his mouth and finally whispered, "Misunderstand, that you love me." The air congealed. Sophie's heart thundered. She lowered her head. Her answer was almost too soft to hear. "If it's not a misunderstanding?" Derek went utterly still. "If," Sophie lifted her face, rims of her eyes crimson, "if I really do love you?" Tears trembled, ready to fall. "I know I'm only your contract wife, I know we divorce in a year, I know I shouldn't feel this, but I can't help it. You're good to me, cooking for me, tucking me in, you," words failed, tears spilled, Derek's chest clenched. He reached out and hauled her against him, arms locking tight. "Idiot," he muttered into her hair. "I love you too. Started 3 years ago." Sophie stiffened in his embrace. 3 years? Her sob muffled against his shirt. "Met you," he said. 3 years back, you attended my lecture at Riverdale University. I was on stage, you were in the audience. The way you took notes, the way you looked up, your smile, I stored every frame." He squeezed harder. "I looked for you for 3 years. Then, last week, your father dangled the strategic marriage and I learned your name was Sophie. That's why you accepted?" "Yes." Derek exhaled. "Because I want you, not as a contract, but for real." He abruptly released her and stepped back, ears scarlet. "Sorry. Shouldn't have said that. We're only, Derek." Sophie cut in, using his full name for the first time. He froze. "Do you know why I said yes to the marriage?" she asked. "Why?" "Because I love you, too. Starting 3 years ago." Derek's eyes widened. "That lecture, I went on purpose. Arrived 3 hours early to grab front row. I filled an entire notebook, not to study, but to keep every word you spoke." More tears fell, this time through a smile. "So when father told me the alliance meant marrying you, I agreed instantly. Even if you didn't love me, even if it was just paper, even if 1 year later we'd split, I still signed, because even 12 months beside you felt worth a lifetime." Derek's own eyes reddened. Words failed him again when Sophie surged forward, yanked him down, and kissed him on tiptoe. It was a clumsy, starving kiss driven by 3 years of longing. Her palms framed his face, her lips moved fiercely over his. 1 stunned second, then Derek shut his eyes, banded an arm around her waist, and kissed her back. Breath tangled, heartbeats welded. Finally Sophie drew away, forehead resting on his. Softly she declared, "Derek, let's stop being contract spouses." "What? Let's be real ones. I want forever, not a year." Looking into her eyes, Derek's own brimmed, yet a brilliant grin split his face. "Deal." Moonlight poured through the window, bathing the two figures now truly, finally, each other's. Days of unmasked honesty tasted like pure honey. Derek abandoned the frosty tycoon facade, the so-called aloof CEO persona went straight into the trash. Now he was a full-time, card-carrying wife devotee, checking in by video between meetings, demanding hugs after work, glued to her side all night. "Derek," Sophie laughed from the boardroom, staring at the 99th text he'd just sent, "You're in a meeting, focus." On the phone screen sat Derek in his corner office, files stacked, expression grave, while under the desk his thumbs flew. "Miss you. 2 minutes till I'm free, wait." The secretary knocked. "Sir, here's next quarter's budget." He didn't look up. "On the desk. Needs your signature, later." She hesitated. "Sir, are you in love?" Derek lifted his gaze, mouth curling. "I'm married." "Ah? I adore my wife," he said, utterly serious. "Cancel my evening events. I go home to her." Secretary, noon on the dot he breezed back to the penthouse. Sophie had made 3 dishes and a soup, everything he loved. He ate better than at any Michelin palace, eyes fixed on her the whole time. "What?" Sophie flushed under the stare. "You're gorgeous," he answered, matter of fact. Pink swept her cheeks. "Eat, don't gawk." "No." He set down his chopsticks and caught her hand. I want to look, my whole life. Sophie's heart skipped. Derek, I'm pregnant. He blinked. What? Pregnant, she repeated, beaming. 2 months. His hands shook. He rose, rounded the table, crouched, and pressed his ear to her belly. Really? His muffled voice trembled with disbelief. Really? Doctor says the baby's healthy. Derek lifted his head, eyes wet, grin exploding. I'm going to be a dad? Yes, you're going to be a dad. He surged upright, swept her into a whirl, then hastily set her down again. Sorry, he blurted, hands flailing. I forgot you can't twist like that. He knelt, careful fingertips brushing the swell of her belly. Baby, he whispered, voice velvet soft, it's Dad. Be good in there, stop tormenting Mommy. Daddy's going to love you so much. Sophie watched him, her heart melting into a puddle. She remembered their wedding days, he'd been the coldest of tycoons. Now he crouched on the carpet, talking to her stomach like any first-time father high on nerves and wonder. Derek, she murmured, combing his hair with her fingers, why are you crying? I'm not, he said, knuckling his eyes. Just, stupidly happy. He rose, folded her into his arms, and held on as if the world depended on it. Sophie, he breathed, Cameron for marrying me. Cameron for loving me. Cameron for giving me a child. Pregnancy turned Derek into glue. He banned her from chores, from the office, from anything remotely taxing. Derek, Sophie laughed from the sofa, watching him bustle in the kitchen. I'm pregnant, not sick. Doesn't matter, he called back without turning. The doctor said the first trimester is rest only. But, no buts. He appeared with a steaming bowl. Here, drink this. 3-hour simmer. She eyed the soup and gave a helpless smile. Since the positive test, Derek had gone full-time housekeeper. He had mastered stir-fries, broths, everything he once outsourced to Michelin star chefs. Derek, she said after a sip, you don't have to. I can manage. I know, he answered, sliding an arm around her, but I want to. I want you to see you don't have to be tough, don't have to stand alone. You have me. I'll look after you, the baby, our home. Leaning against him, Sophie felt her eyes sting. She remembered childhood, her father walking out, leaving her to armor herself with independence. Now, finally, she had someone to lean on. I love you, she whispered. Love you more, he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, so much it hurts. 9 months later Sophie delivered a baby boy. Derek waited outside the delivery suite, the first cry turned his eyes red. A nurse emerged, tiny bundle in arms. Congratulations, a healthy boy, 7 pounds 8 ounces. Derek stared at the wrinkled miracle, hands trembling. May I hold him? Of course, the nurse smiled, placing the infant in the crook of his elbow. Support his head. He accepted the baby as though lifting crystal. Baby, he crooned, Daddy's here. I'll protect you, protect Mommy, protect our home. They wheeled Sophie out. Seeing Derek cradling their son, she couldn't help beaming. Derek, she called softly, let me see. He carried the boy to her bedside and laid him in her arms. He's so tiny, she said, tears pooling. Perfect. Looks like you, Derek declared. Your eyes, your nose, and your mouth, especially when he pouts. Derek laughed, kissed her brow, then their son's. Sophie, he said, Cameron for everything. Cameron to you too, she replied. Thank you, Derek. They smiled at each other, their child nestled between them, sunshine spilling through the window onto a future wide open. 3 years later, at the Sterling Global Holdings annual shareholders gala, Derek stood at the podium delivering year-end results. In an impeccably tailored black suit, expression glacial, eyes detached, the textbook Wall Street predator. This year revenue, his voice was low, clipped, rose 30%. Appreciate your effort. He paused, gaze softening. Finally, he added, gratitude to my wife, Sophie. Without her, none of this exists. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. 3 years ago I married her. Back then I was cold, clueless about love, hiding behind a contract. She taught me what love, trust, family mean. A grin cracked his composure. Now we have a son, Sterling Nyen Hawthorne, Nyen, the character for longing, Hawthorne, from Sophie. May he always remember his mother is the love of my life. Applause thundered. Derek stepped down, found her in the crowd, pulled her close and kissed her forehead in front of hundreds. Wife, he murmured, Cameron. Sophie's cheeks flamed. Everyone's watching, let them, he said, unrepentant. Kissing my wife is a husband's right. That night, back home, little Sterling Nyen Hawthorne slept, the housekeeper had clocked out. They shared rare quiet on the couch. Derek, Sophie nestled against him, today was ridiculously sappy. Truth isn't sappy, he countered, tilting her chin up. When I spoke, I meant every word. I know, she said, but so publicly. I don't care, he tightened his embrace. I want the planet to know I love you, you're my wife, and I'm yours. Luckiest day of my life, she whispered, was saying yes. They exchanged smiles, wrapped in moonlight. This is their tale, one contract marriage, one love discovered after vows, one story of masks falling away. But above all, a story about love, turning strangers into lovers, lovers into spouses, spouses into family. Love taught them trust, dependence, how to become better versions of themselves. Thank you for listening. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? If you liked the video, please like and share. We look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more tales. See you next time.